Welcome to the Grief Dreams podcast. My name is Sean Ram alongside Dr. Joshua Black. It's a beautiful day here in the winter months, and we are here doing what we love to do, which is a podcast and interviewing some pretty cool people and talking about the topics of grief, loss, and dreams you have after your loved ones pass away. Joshua, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Sean. Thanks for having us back on the podcast. It's always great doing it with you and having these meaningful conversations. We had a little bit of a break there because we recorded a bunch, but now it's good to get back to this and interview someone new.
Absolutely. On today's podcast, we have with us Dr. Sarah Neustadter, and she is a licensed psychologist based in Los Angeles, specializing in suicide prevention, loss, and grief, including those grieving the suicide of a loved one. She has had over a decade of professional experience identifying and treating those at risk of suicide, especially teenagers. Sarah is passionate about helping others understand grief as an entryway into a deeper process of spiritual growth. I like that. She holds a bachelor's degree from New York University's Gallatin School for Individualized Study and a PhD in clinical and transpersonal psychology from the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Palo Alto, California. She is the author of the Love You Like the Sky, Surviving the Suicide of a Beloved. You can learn more about Sarah here, www.sarahneustadter.com. I'll give you the spelling, Neustadter for last name. And you can also follow her on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have guests on that we haven't formally met and chatted to. So I'm actually really excited to hear about your journey on how you came to get into this. A lot of people would say a field that's filled with a lot of deep suffering, but it seems like you found a way to maintain the balance within your life to be able to help those in need that, a lot of people may not know how to help. So I'm really excited to talk about suicide prevention. I'm curious, to start this off, is what made you want to get a PhD? Because when I look back, I think I'm half crazy that I want to do it. And so what was it always a dream of yours to get the PhD or no?
Well, it's a good question. I know. Are we half crazy? No, it wasn't always a dream. In fact, I didn't really know what I wanted to study or what kind of career I wanted to have when I was in undergrad. And through sort of my trial and error and trying to figure out what I was good at or what would be a meaningful career for me, I found a spiritual teacher actually while I was traveling and living in Tel Aviv at the time in Israel. And this woman was doing really beautiful, intuitively guided, sort of more spiritually based sessions with me. And I was very inspired by her to work with people one-on-one in that particular way. But I also wanted to have more of a psych credential and background to sort of balance the spiritual and the more traditional psychology. And then I've always been fascinated by people and really trying to understand what makes them tick or what makes us tick and how to grow and evolve as humans. So the combo of the two, and suicide was not really on my radar to study or focus on specifically. The topic of suicide seemed to grab me rather than me pursue it. And it was through a series of different life events and the death of my boyfriend, the suicide of my boyfriend in graduate school. And so it felt like a calling and one that it's something I've thought about, like just philosophically and existentially since a very young age. So it sort of all came together in graduate school, for better or for worse.
Wow, I didn't know the loss actually happened while you're in your studies. How did you manage to finish your studies?
That's a good question. Yeah, so my graduate school boyfriend, who was in my cohort at my psychology program, took his life in, I would say, our third year. It was a 5-year program. And I was so distraught and devastated. And I basically told myself that, his death had to, like, it couldn't, my whole experience at graduate school and his death couldn't all be for nothing. Like, I refused to not finish the PhD program and have this loss all happen together. So I was like, I'll be damned if I don't get this PhD. And so it was actually a really great outlet for me to focus mentally, especially the writing of my dissertation, and then, seeing clients for practicums and internships. It was a nice way for me to not be thinking about my own pain and to really learn how to be present with others, even while I was going through my own, devastation and grief. It was actually like almost like a double PhD happening at the same time. But I was really determined to graduate, and I actually was able to do that. Like, I think I finished my dissertation first in my class. So it really actually motivated me in a bittersweet way.
And I always have to ask this when people say they wrote the dissertation. What was it on?
It was on a light topic. It was about spiritual factors that influence people's decision, like how they know that their partner is the right one to marry. So I wanted to understand how people know, like, that the person is right for them. And so in doing so, I explored these X factors, these like bizarre stories or situations that happened while people were courting one another that lent them that knowing. And then I analyzed the results. And I picked that topic because I was grieving so hard. And originally I wanted to study spiritual motivations for suicide attempts. But since my boyfriend had taken his life, it was just, there was no way I was going to write my dissertation on suicide. So I picked a really light-hearted topic.
Yeah, that's a lot different from the first one you would have done, and probably would have been very triggering too, as you're saying, to even try to complete that. How did the school respond to the death of a student in your cohort?
I went to the school straight from the hospital after my ex-boyfriend had passed, and they were initially very supportive to me and really tried to be there for me. And the community at large came out, and we had a memorial. We had like an Irish wake for my ex-boyfriend. So they were pretty supportive. They also held an impromptu sort of grief counseling group for anybody that felt like they needed extra support. They offered hands-on counseling for anybody that felt like they needed that. So initially it was great. And then I don't know if you're familiar, but like as time goes by, people kind of get on with their lives and go about their merry way. And so after a short amount of time, that support kind of fell away. But initially it was pretty supportive.
That's good to hear, because it can be a daunting task, especially when you're in school, to continue on. I know a lot of schools don't really have a protocol how to deal with even just death in general. But suicide loss is just can be even more traumatizing than some others. So now that you're done your PhD, what was your next step? What did you know? Did you get an office? Did you try to start the business? Did you want to write the book? So what was the next step after completing the PhD?
Well, I moved to Los Angeles about a year after my ex's suicide. We were living in Palo Alto. And so I moved down to LA to do my pre and postdoc internships here. And while I was simultaneously writing my dissertation and starting to write my book, because the writing process was a really good cathartic outlet for me to just put everything I needed to say, or every layer of emotion, out on the page. So the book started pretty immediately once I moved to LA. And then you have to do your thousands of hours of internship training, and then you've got to get licensed. So it was a process of, that takes many years. And then once I was licensed, I had already started a private practice, and then I was also working in a group practice in downtown LA. And so that's kind of how I just sort of followed the steps. And then it took me 9 years to complete my book. So I wrote pretty intensely for the first 3 years after my ex's death, and then I took a break. And then about 2 years ago, I returned to the manuscript to just complete it and get it out there because there's so many more suicides happening these days, and I felt like it was really important for me to finalize like my grieving process and my healing process and share that with other suicide survivors.
It's so interesting. 9 years. Is it my biggest fear? Well, I don't know if it's fear, is when you put something down that you've written, even for like I've done with publications, let it sit for 2 months, and you come back to it. All of a sudden, you're rewording everything. You're redoing the format. Did that ever happen when you came back the second time
Oh,
to
yeah.
the book? That you're like, oh, I got to redo this, or this needs to be changed.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've sat down and reread and changed the title and changed the structure of the book and edited it out so much and added more over the years that, yeah, it was almost unrecognizable sometimes, like what I had originally written in and what I completed with. It's definitely a process. And the interesting thing about surviving a suicide or grieving, I think, a traumatic death of any kind is that you grow so much from the experience. So I had an editor tell me in the early years of my writing of the book that she thought that the book would be a lot stronger and fuller once I had aged and matured a bit more and could look back in hindsight and then share from that vantage point about my loss instead of really kind of just sharing it from the immediate space of grief. And in the beginning, I didn't quite agree with her or want to agree with her. But then as 9 years went by and I came back to the manuscript having fully healed, it was definitely, I felt I had a lot more wisdom to share. So it was a growth process, and I was able to kind of write over the years, and there are bits in paragraphs and chapters that reflect certain stages of who I was during that 9-year period.
One thing I loved about your bio is that statement of helping people understand grief as an entryway into a deeper process of spiritual growth. And I felt that doing the podcast, and I'm sure Joshua has as well. You know, it's one thing when we first started doing it, people would make comments like, oh, you're doing a podcast on grief. It's not going to be kind of dark and kind of like heavy. And people were concerned, especially family members, of like us entering into this field and how it's going to impact us. And personally, I felt that it's added so much to my life and really made me focus in on kind of what the important things of life are, and really help develop that spiritual growth as you did. What has it done for you in your spiritual growth?
Yeah, no, that's a great question and observation. I think for people that really let themselves feel the pain and the loss of grief, it's so unbearable that there has to be a way through it and a way to transform it. It's just a question of like, how deep do you want to go into it? And then how do you get yourself out? And I didn't know the answers to any of that at the time. And I couldn't find any books that were specific to suicide survivor loss, especially of like a partner. And so I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And what I realized was there was something incredibly sacred about the experience of being in so much darkness and so much pain and so much sadness that didn't feel like it would ever end. And my like darkest moments were also the most private and the most sacred. I don't think I could have grieved that deeply if I were with someone else. And I had to learn how to sit with my own pain and be with it. And it was a lot of pain, and kind of be in it by myself. Grief can be very lonely, very dislocating, especially like suicide, because it's traumatic and it's not the norm, and we don't really understand it, and it's so terrifying. So it revealed being in that place where it was just, I felt like I was in hell for 3 years. I had to tap in and access parts of me that I didn't really know I had I had. And then to get myself out, I tried everything because, we're therapists. So I'm open to modalities. I'll try anything to help get me out of my own pain. And so I worked with different psychologists and different spiritual teachers and, so many practices. And eventually, as time went by, I got a little healing from here and then a little bit of a shift in perspective there and support. And, I found my way. But it was definitely a process. And I think it's important to look at it as an opening into some form of transformation, because who you are when you go through the loss initially is going to be drastically different than who you are when you come out of the grief. And so I think it's an important reminder, because some people can just get stuck in the grief and not get out of it, or not fully process all of it. And then it rears its ugly head later in life in unexpected and painful ways.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's wonderful to hear. It's exactly how I think about it, in terms of it's a dark journey almost, and just understanding yourself, and maybe reawakening some of those tools that maybe lie dormant when you're not grieving, you're happy and everything's fine. But here comes this, tidal wave of emotion and everything that's kind of making you feel like it's overwhelming. But, humans are amazing people, and we find these ways to kind of cope, and then eventually, manage and thrive in these environments. And the grief process seems to be like that. It seems to be one of those journeys that's difficult and hard to kind of express. But um, it's very interesting, and I'm glad that you were talking about that there's moments in there, in the darkness, that you kind of feel something kicking in you that's needed almost. It's hard to describe, really.
Yeah, it's once you're in it, and hopefully, people never have to experience something this traumatic. But when you're in it, like, it is really hard to describe. It's really scary. It's really lonely. And to your earlier point, there is something enriching about having these kinds of conversations about it, because, like, when you're in grief, it's almost like you're in an abyss. You're at the edge of life. You're sort of looking at death's door. And as you face that, there's something really enriching and powerful that you come to learn about life itself. And you can only get that when you're really looking at death in a certain way.
Yeah, and also have a different reverence, almost respect, and awareness of people who've been through that as well. Like, it's like people who've gone through like a physical battle. This is like the psychological battle people go through, and then when you get out of it, or seem like you're getting out of it, it's like you want to connect with people, or you like talking to people who've gone through that as well, because you have that respect and reverence for. They're like, yeah, oh, I know exactly what you've been through. And it's kind of like that with the podcast and talking to different individuals and hearing their stories, and you have a connection with people who've experienced loss, that maybe not the same as my loss, but we're all connected in that there was loss. But yeah, there's definitely it's like we're in the same club.
So I'm pretty curious about, you said something about the deep suffering. You had 3 years of deep suffering and you're trying different things. I'm really curious about, what were some specific issues that you had to face that I wouldn't expect that you were facing?
Well, first off, I was suicidal myself, and I wasn't expecting that. So, and what I've learned over the years is that if somebody takes their own life, the people who are left behind are at high risk for their own suicide. And so when my ex-boyfriend died, I just wanted to die too. And I had absolutely no will to live. So figuring out, or getting to a place where I had the will to live again, was hard, because I felt like I was trapped in my body. All I wanted to do was die, but I knew that I couldn't, because of how much pain it would cause my family and friends, because it's such an unbearable kind of pain to survive a suicide. So I just felt trapped and I didn't know what to do. I really just wanted to get out of my life. And so that was an unexpected thing that I had to navigate. And that took a lot of work, a lot of time, and a lot of faith. So, and then coming to like find the meaning for why I was experiencing something like this, that was another thing that I grappled with. Like, and that was really important in my healing and my grieving, is like, how can I make some meaning out of this loss? Like, what's the purpose for this? And so that became like a narrative that I adopted in helping me grow as a person and also as the psychologist. Is like, okay, I've got to be able to use this experience to help others who are going through something. Like, that was really like the biggest meaning that I latched onto during that time, was like, this was happening so that I could help other people who are going to go through that. And I feel like that's also a common thing that I hear a lot when people survive a tragedy. They want to be able to share and teach other people how to navigate through that similar tragedy.
Yeah, finding meaning it does something to you in a sense of reawakens the joy almost within you, like that spirit, that fight for life. And it's interesting, like when the way you were talking, how it was guilt that saved you, right? Like because you would have had so much guilt if you would have took your own life. So even though like it's interesting how people say, guilt's bad or whatever, but no, like it actually saved you. It's very interesting how you must have been able to release it and then use something else as a motivation for life. And I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't have any problem now that I'm on the other side of this, actually, and I wouldn't call it guilt. I just see it as objective fact. So like when I write about how, for people who are contemplating suicide, when I either write about it or I tell them directly, like, your death will cause innumerable suffering for those that love you for generations to come. And that's just a fact. So, I mean, and I think it's important because for a lot of reasons, but causing that kind of pain is not what I think a person who is suffering really wants to do, but yet they don't really understand how deeply their death will affect others. And so I do like to call people out on that, and I do like to speak to that. And I know it may not make me seem like warm and fuzzy, but having lived through the suicide of somebody I know how life-changing and how traumatic and how devastating it is, and I would never wish that upon anybody else. So it was actually more of like a moral concern for me than I would say my own guilt. It was like, there's no way that I could ever do this to anybody. Like, that was my moral ground.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's pretty cool. So yeah, it's interesting talking about this stuff with you. And I'm curious, one of your aspects of what you do is suicide prevention. And since you've been through the gamut of that yourself and you help others, what is it, some things that can help people, I guess, find meaning in their life or find hope to live?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I'm sure you are familiar with helping people with that. It can be tricky, but one of my favorite quotes about suicide is by an author, Stephen Levine, and he says that when people are feeling suicidal, what they're most longing for is not to end their life, but so that their life is full and they're not in their pain. So I like to talk with clients about how can we make your life full when it feels empty. And that can be, just getting to some basic stuff can also be challenging, and that's where the work lies. But really helping people find some sense of purpose to their life and who they are. And it doesn't even have to be purpose in like a grand sense, like, oh, I'm going to save the world, or I'm going to start this company, or I'm going to, do something significant with my career. It could be something as simple as like, my purpose is just to enjoy myself or enjoy my life or to feel loved. And then we help kind of work backwards, like how can we get them to that thing that they're wanting. And that takes a lot of creativity. And I think that's where sort of the art of therapy comes in. And it's different for each client.
You talked about different ways, different motivations, and using your boyfriend's suicide to kind of fuel you to kind of find meaning in it, and that helped you move forward. What were some other things that helped you as a source? What were some of those things? Specifically personal spirituality.
Well, I worked with two therapists at the time. One was a Jungian analyst who helped me learn about my dreams, because my dreams were very vivid at the time after he had passed. And then another one was a therapist who really was more like holding my grief. So I would go into her office and just cry. And then I started working with a female shaman in San Francisco. And she and I did a lot of readings and, attempting to communicate with spirit and my ex-boyfriend on the other side. And then she prescribed me a bunch of rituals to do, like daily offerings in meditation. I started meditating every day, almost twice a day. And that practice of sitting was really helpful, because I would usually be flooded with tears and insights, and it was a powerful time, the sitting practices. But during my morning meditation time, I would also make offerings or do whatever that shaman had recommended according to her particular shamanistic tradition of Burkina Faso. And I don't know that I fully kind of believed or ascribed to that tradition, but it was helpful to have something tangible to do, some sort of ritual, like bring flowers to the ocean or write a letter to him or gather his favorite foods and kind of take a picnic at the beach and read the letter that I wrote out loud and then kind of send it off into the ocean. Things like that were helpful to me and helped me to deepen my relationship with some sort of higher power. So I needed to really have some faith and strengthen my faith and my trust that something was happening beyond what I knew, and that it was all going to be okay eventually, and also to trust that my ex-boyfriend wasn't completely dead. So changing my views on life after death was really comforting. And so I would keep building as almost like a new neural pathway, like that belief that he was still alive in some other form. And then I would look for signs and synchronicities or things that would confirm that. And so I still do that.
I think that's very helpful. And my personal belief is that these external forces, whatever you want to call it, it can be helpful in helping you kind of lean on something during those times, during those deepest, darkest times. It can help you and to lean into something like that, and whatever it is for you, and again, people, I don't necessarily believe that you have to be fully committed to all aspects of whether it's an established religion or whether it's a new age spirituality or whatever it is, whatever you want to call, I guess, God or the higher power. But I do personally believe that there are some helpful elements there to kind of, because sometimes you're at your end, you've exhausted your own resources, you've exhausted your energies, and it's difficult summoning that type of, will, courage, motivation to kind of move forward each and every day. And I think there's a reason some of these have lasted this long, is that even in the rituals, the processes, there's something beautiful about a ritual, about a process, about a funeral ritual, about a remembering someone, seeing butterflies around you and imagining that's that person. There's something beautiful there and some magic there that I can't quite put a finger on, but I personally believe there's something important there to kind of to help people.
Definitely. I mean, having a structure to lean on is really supportive. I come from a Orthodox Jewish background, and the ritual, when somebody dies, you sit Shiva, and there's like a whole protocol, and how long you do it, and it lasts, like the grieving process lasts like a year, and there's like a time frame, and I didn't necessarily utilize that, but I can appreciate the value of having something that just kind of is already there, that you don't have to think about and you don't have to reinvent, and hopefully provides like the touchstones and the markers throughout the grieving process that kind of get you to the next place.
You mentioned something interesting about dreams. So you actually that was one of the paths that you took, or tools you tried to make use of, was your own dreams. And so I know there's a lot of different ways one could look at their dreams. That some people go on the internet and find someone, reputable or not, they they look, and then other people go to someone maybe more trained, like a Jungian psychologist.
So, I mean, in grad school, I had this fabulous professor who was very Jungian, and she would always talk about the lives of dreams. And so I was very taken with her way of exploring dreams. And so I sought her out to kind of go through a couple of my dreams that I was having, because like I said, my dream life was super active and vivid at the time, and I wanted to understand, like, what is this trying to communicate to me? But I've always been fascinated by dreams, and we had another dream interpretation course at grad school, which was a different approach than the Jungian approach. And actually, this woman was great, the Jungian psychologist. She had me actually take these large pieces of paper and draw the different scenes out from my dream and color them in. And so I'd bring them into her office, and we'd look at them together and kind of go over the images and the symbols. And that was really helpful. And, I had those pictures of my dreams for years. So it really kind of grounded in the dream, because sometimes you forget. Like, you'll have a really powerful dream, and then unless you do something with it, like write it down or record it or even draw it, you're likely to forget its significance as time goes by. So it felt like really important that I also kept a dream journal at the time. I kept a journal, just a general journal, and then I kept a dream journal, and then I kept a journal for signs and synchronicities of my ex-boyfriend in the afterlife, and then I wrote those down.
Oh, that's interesting. So just a way to, like, almost, we had a couple people on talk about the benefits of journaling through grief. And so that's kind of what you're doing too at the same time. So what do you still remember some of those dreams you had that were really vivid and that you found some meaning in?
Yes, I remember one that I drew.
Do.
Well, the one that I had to draw, I definitely remember, although I don't know if you want specifically a dream where I was dreaming about my ex-boyfriend who passed, or because the vivid dream didn't have him in it. The vivid dream was something separate, but I can share either one.
Let's do both. How about that?
Okay, great. So the first one that I I colored on these large pieces of paper were sort of me and a friend and this shaman that I was working with, and we traveled through this really old, huge, clunky, like 70s computer. So we jumped in it, and then we popped out somewhere. And when we popped out, we were on this like gorgeous tropical island called Mariposa. And it was like out of the Caribbean, and there was like Rastas going by with like shell earrings. And there was a sort of a sequence of like wandering through this island, and things would pop up from my childhood. Like, my best friend was there, and she was being eaten by sharks. And then we ended up on a dock with like 3 live, very large cats drinking tea at a table, and one of them didn't have a head. And so we went through the process of exploring, and it's just at face value, what we came to was like, this was a big process of transformation. I'm going from one sort of old, clunky way of being and transforming and popping out into this like tropical paradise, which is called, you spoke about butterflies. Mariposa means butterfly in Spanish. And so I'm going to this island of butterflies. And so at the time, it was actually a very hopeful and powerful dream that some transformation was happening, and it was happening, and it was going to end relatively well. And some of the other pieces about the cat without the head, and that was an image, and we talked about that. And so that was that one.
Hold on, what did the cat, why was your friend beating a shark and the cat? I'm curious about those images.
Yeah, well, there was a piece about my best friend from childhood and her personal story of having a very abusive mother, and that was something that I sort of resonated with growing up, and so that was sort of like the effects of that were at play in this dynamic, I think, without getting too personal about this, in the death and the suicide of my ex-boyfriend. So there was something there for me about this little girl who was being eaten by sharks in childhood. And then the cat thing, I'm still not 100% on, but the image, like a cat is a very sensual, feminine creature, and they're very tactile, they're very soft. And so the cat without the head represented being a lot more embodied and not being so much in the head. So it was like a movement from the intellect to a more embodied, sort of sensual way of being in the world.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that makes more sense.
And I'm curious about the computer, because that was really interesting. Kind of just glazed over that, but that reminds me of that movie Tron, where like they use the computer to get into a different world. So you said 70s computer, so that makes even more sense.
Or even Jumanji.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I can't say that I've seen those two movies, but I know what you mean. It was like,
oh yeah, watch the new Tron, and then that's like in 10 minutes that scene happens. But yeah, that was very cool to see. You use the computer to kind of, did you change shape into like a digital form?
I can't remember if I did. That would be, I think it was one of those things that happened so quickly. It wasn't like broken down that I got digitized. But I was born in the last year, the 70s. So I think there was something about that, like my birth year being whatever that old, it was all like sepia and brown colored. And so it's like the Wizard of Oz moved from black and white into color.
Yeah. That's huge. That's a huge significance there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah. So thank you for explaining some of that, because I know we talk about like grief dreams a lot, like dreams of the deceased, and a lot of the stuff's really self-explanatory in a lot of people's eyes. But this dream was so, I wanted you to explain a little bit further, just so people can understand how dream symbols work and how people can process them differently, especially in the Jungian way. So I think that you gave them enough detail to understand how or what to expect if they were to go to a Jungian therapist.
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know that every Jungian would have everybody draw out dreams. I've never even heard of that, but it was a helpful creative process to kind of get the dream from like the ethers and into the world. Yeah. And the transformation in that dream is also really helpful to just give me something to work with. Do you want to hear the other dream? Do we have time for that?
Do I want to hear the other dream? You know what kind of podcast this is?
I don't know. Okay. So this is different kind. Sometimes people want to hear dreams, and sometimes people don't want to hear dreams. So I know this is your podcast.
Well, we'd be the terrible podcast
I
based
know.
off of your dreams if we didn't want to hear them.
I just had to ask. But so this dream was more of like a snippet kind of a dream. So I was in this like old-fashioned movie theater, like up in the balcony watching a film. And I like bent down and was looking at the floor, and I caught a picture of the image of my hand, and then my former boyfriend's hand, and I just saw our hands, and we both had these matching diamond bands on, and the diamond bands, they were like a band of diamonds that went all around, and I saw his hand, and then I saw my hand, and then I woke up and I was like, wow, I think I need to go get that ring. Like, he's wearing that ring on the other side, and I want to have a ring like that. And I didn't even know, I'm not really a person that's into diamonds or anything, so I had to look up like what that diamond ring was. So it's a band of rings, and it's called an eternity band. And so the image, like just the name eternity felt potent to me. It felt like we were sort of bonded in this very romantic way. And so I started this quest to find this eternity band, like the one from the dream. And so I looked at different jewelry shops, and I went to different flea markets. And one day I was walking in our town in Mountain View, and I saw a sale sign at this jewelry store that I hadn't gone into. And so I walked in and I asked them if they had any eternity bands. And they showed me a couple, but they didn't have anything in my size. I wanted it on the middle finger. But they said they had one in the back. And so when they went to get it, they brought it to me, and it was definitely the one from the dream. So I started telling them why I was looking for it. It was, Valentine's Day was approaching, and I said I wanted to buy this as a gift to myself because my boyfriend had died. And the woman who was showing me the rings started telling me how her husband had died a few years ago. And so she came out and she gave me a hug, and then she told me that the owner of the jewelry shop's husband had died, like 10 years ago. And so she was in the back, and she brought her out, and that woman gave me a hug. And so we all were bonding in this shared, pretty horrible, rare experience of having lost partners. And it was very hopeful because they had also found new partners. And so it was just like this beautiful kind of synchronicity that happened as a result of this dream. And so I bought the ring, and it was just like a very special moment to share with these women in the jewelry store.
Wow. So you actually told them you're buying it because of a dream?
Mm-hmm.
Oh
yeah. And that it was a gift to myself, because of my ex's death.
Wow.
And I saw this ring in a dream, and they were like, wow, this ring must have been for you, because we've had it in the back, and it's totally the one that looked like the dream, and it fit my finger perfectly.
I think that's remarkable how you opened up about your dream. I commend you for that. And it opened up this beautiful conversation, right, with the other ladies there. And for you to hear about something that it seemed that you needed to hear about the hopefulness of being able to find another partner moving forward in life, which can be very scary. I have never lost a partner, but I can understand that, especially if someone died the way your boyfriend did. And so have you met someone new this day?
I can't say that I have, unfortunately. I've dated and I've been in relationships, but they, I am not currently in one.
Is it hard the first time you went on a date and to wear the ring?
Well, yes, it was hard to go the first time I went on a date. It took me about 3.5 years till I was able to do that. But I don't think I wore the ring on the date. And so I don't wear it on my ring finger. I wear it on the middle finger. And nobody, I don't wear it all the time, but nobody has asked me what it was about. So I never had to explain it. But yes, dating was definitely hard afterwards.
Well, that's so interesting. No one's mentioned it or asked. And you're right. I think a tattoo, people ask, because it's right there. But jewelry, yeah, it's not something that I think is commonly. A necklace, maybe. Wow, that is interesting. Do you want people to ask about it?
I do have a tattoo that I got in memory of him. And so when people see the tattoo, I like people to ask me why or what it's about. It's not totally visible all the time, but it would mean a lot if somebody asked me what it was about or why I got it.
Yeah, I think that dream it's so beautiful because it's what images popped up are obviously significant for you, and to get the clarity of seeing the ring and knowing what it looks like, that's impressive. That's interesting. That's obviously significant. That's amazing. And to hold hands and to feel that, and what was that feeling like when you woke up?
It was a good feeling. It was like, sort of like a startle, like, wow, like he's got a ring on his hand over on the other side. And it was like, it kind of gave me a little like motivation, a burst of like, okay, now I want to have a ring, and like whatever that signifies, whether it's like, we're bonded, we're wedded, I don't know, we're connected somehow, like for eternity. Like at that time, that meant a lot to me, like to get that communication.
There's definitely a beauty there, a beauty in that. It now becomes a memory. That dream now is a memory of that dream moving forward, and it seems to be very important in that continuing bond aspect.
And it was helpful in my healing process, I would say, because it got me out of the house, it got me moving, it got me,
I can imagine if you're like having a terrible couple weeks or something, and you get a dream like that can do something to help you shake you out of that spot that we all kind of get into, and especially what you get into is that deep grief and that deep loss and those feelings that it can be really overwhelming and exhausting. But like to get a dream like that, I would imagine that it'd be refreshing and kind of uplifting to kind of continue forward. And then to have the interaction at the jewelry store is incredible, even more incredible. And I'm really glad that you had that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was really sweet. And, I think for anybody that has lost somebody and then you dream about them, it's like the most magical sort of gift. It's like to get another encounter with them just for that, whatever short time that is. It's like so precious. And yeah, it sort of changes, whether it's for the day or for the week, it just sort of, you don't want to let go of that feeling.
Did the dream, when you woke up, did you feel loved, more loved?
Yeah. No, definitely I did. And I felt, I felt loved, and I felt connected, and like, oh, he's there. I'm not totally alone. Yeah. And it was helpful, like I said, I think, grounding these dreams with like objects or drawing them also helps you kind of hold on to them longer.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That is interesting. I want to also mention, you're not the first person I heard of that had a dream of something and found it. So there's another person in a sample I collected, and the dream was her fiance died before they could get married. And so in the dream, he presented her with basically this ring. And though she went on, like you, looking for this ring and found it also and bought it for herself. So it's interesting how like there's other people out there that didn't get a chance to have that object, and yet it's presented in a dream, and it exists somewhere in the world, which I think is so fascinating.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there is some fluidity between the dream world and this world, and you can tap into that. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities, and just generally in regular society, and not maybe taking for dreams for granted. And I feel like in general there's a missed opportunity there to really gain some interesting information that we can't really, I guess, process normally during the waking life, or it just doesn't come to us, or it's a different way of kind of evaluating or looking at a situation, which is beautiful.
Yeah, totally. And also during that time, here's another little dream snippet. Like I said, I think I had access to like the clues and the gifts of these dreams because I was really working with them and I was writing down my dreams. And if maybe I wasn't, then like they might have just flitted by and I woke up and I couldn't remember it, and then I didn't get the ring, or I didn't, have those moments. But 3 months after my former boyfriend died, I had this tiny dream of this cat, this gray tabby cat, sleeping on my bed. And when I woke up in the morning, I said to myself, wow, that's my cat. I've got to go find him. and I didn't have a cat at that time. And so I went around the Bay Area cat shelters and animal shelters, and I was looking for the cat in the dream. And I kept thinking it was a male cat, and I couldn't find the right gray tabby male. And then finally I went to the last shelter in Redwood City, and they showed me the only gray tabby they had, which was a female. And it was immediately like a recognition, and she was the one from my dream. And she stuck her paw out at me, and we've been together ever since. And she's been such a source of support, especially during those early months of grief. So that was an interesting kind of vision that happened in a dream that I followed up on as well. And I'm so thankful that I did, because I can't imagine having gone through all of that without having, a cat or a pet.
Wow. So the ring wasn't even the first time you did it. That's wild. I think that's so cool how you're able to follow it through.
She literally follows her dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I follow my dreams.
There's a quote that I always see on like journal books. It says, follow your dreams, they know the way. And so it's actually kind of funny how you actually literally follow your dreams, and you never know, right? Like, but it's interesting to look back and see like how amazing the cat was for your grief, because we've talked to people on here. They say it's such a comfort, and especially when you're feeling alone, as you were saying, it gives you that reduce the loneliness in a way that it's not replacing the individual, but it's like something new. And it's not like a boyfriend or another partner. It's a sentient being that is there with you, and you're caring for it as it cares for you, and it does something.
It's that unconditional love. The conditional love is kind of like, all right, you put an effort into here, and there's always these obviously social contracts, whatnot. But yeah, an animal, a pet. I have a dog, and he's right beside us. But it's that unconditional love of that relationship that's beautiful. You come home, and there they are, and they're ready to be greeted and to cuddle and to whatever happens, and they accept you for who you are, which in society doesn't really happen too often sometimes. But I know that feeling. But it's something very special, and I'm really happy that you've experienced that with your cat. What's her name?
Her name is Hazel.
Oh, wonderful.
That's the name that she came with at the shelter, and she's sitting here right now too. She's like I think she was heaven sent to me. I don't know. There's something very mystical about that part of the dream. Her showing up in a dream and then me finding her. She's like a healer cat, and so I feel like somebody or this is part of my spiritual meaning making. Like somebody was throwing me a little bit of a bone by putting me and Hazel together so that she could be there for me. So yeah, I'm super glad I followed up on that.
Was it actually, just a follow-up question, was it difficult to get the cat, and in terms of knowing that, hey, here's another potential loss that I have to experience because the cat will die before me? Most likely.
No, I didn't have that thought with her. I think about that more now that she's older, and it's definitely a thought that I have when I'm starting a new relationship with somebody, because I think it's just part of PTSD.
Yeah.
Like, do I really want to go here with a new person, because they could probably die before me, and so like I wouldn't want to have to go through that whole experience all over again.
Is Hazel your first pet?
Yes, my first pet as a grown independent person. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. I think that's great. I think me as well. I got my dog at 31. I guess 31, and I never had one before. So I think that's courageous to go out there and say, especially after a dream, to say, you know what, I need a cat.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I like to live, adventurously and follow the call as best as I can.
All right. And one of our last questions we like to ask on the podcast is, if you could have a dream tonight, what would that dream look like to you?
I could have any dream tonight.
Yes,
wow.
Anything.
I think I would like a dream
You can even go
about
back
what.
into the computer if you want to.
No, I don't think I want to. I'm going to keep going towards the beach, not the computer. I would like a dream sort of guidance about what my next steps in life are. It feels like I'm kind of at a transition and something unknown is before me. So a dream about like what's coming or what steps am I supposed to be taking. What about you guys?
Well, hold on. I want to ask some follow-up questions to yours.
Okay.
Yeah, then we'll give. We never been asked that, but we will
Yeah.
definitely answer that after.
So, would you want him to be wearing the ring also? From the other dream?
Oh, I don't see him I'm not needing him to be in my dreams at the moment. I mean, if I see him again in a dream, that would be lovely, but I'm not asking for that because, like, I've gone through the grief and I've had to, fall out of love with him and accept that he's gone and that he and I are no longer together or going to be together. So I don't feel like that romantic desire to see a ring or anything with him.
You just want to have a conversation about what he sees in your life and where you're going.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like what I see him as a guide. So yeah, like what's the guidance for this open, unknown future of mine?
It's pretty cool. All right, Sean.
I'm excited.
What kind of dream do you want?
I would like to dream of my grandfather and grandmother, and they died. My grandfather a couple years ago, grandmother last year, and I haven't had a grief dream of them. So I would like to have one of either of them or both of them to kind of pop up, and maybe just a living room, maybe in our living room when the Christmas tree is still up, and maybe just have a chat or something, or something crazy, maybe like. Yeah, I could do like a beach. That'd be nice. Beach, forest, stream, something serene. Maybe running water or ocean nearby. But yeah, I would like to have one of them.
Cool.
And I think you're on the right track, Sarah. I think guidance would be a good one. But for me, I think guidance along with just sitting in their company would be great. What about you?
Well, Sean. I've been watching The Witcher lately. I don't know if you guys seen this, but no, okay. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, a lot of castles and stuff. And I always been a fan of Scotland because my dad was so highly into his Scottish heritage, and so I always watched Braveheart and stuff. So the dream I would want on my father would be to visit Scotland. And to really just walk around some of the castles there and just really chat and to really be in the moment. I don't know if I want anything said per se, but just sort of like just do that together, because I think it's one thing that I would have loved to do that I never got a chance to do. So I think that would probably be really cool. And if The Witcher walked by, that would just make it even more badass. We gotta bleep that out. Hold on. Even great, because then we can both sort of just chuckle at the scenery there. But yeah, it's interesting. I just want to talk about even my own loss. I actually had a lot of emotions come up. It was the 11th year that my father wasn't around, and it's interesting because in school, when Christmas came around, there wasn't a lot of emotions. But for this being the first year, finish the PhD, even the master's, to finish that, these emotions were coming up that didn't come up prior, and I sort of sat and reflected on that a little bit. And I think, as much as school was great, it also was a hindrance for emotions to come up because there's so much work to do to finish that goal or achieve that meaning making. And so it was nice to have those emotions come up. And I was sitting with my aunt at the time, and so I got to thank them for the roles they've played in my life and in his life. So I just wanted to mention that in the sense of we just passed over the holidays there, and it's been 11 years, and these things come up, and it's nice reflecting on why now. So anyways, that's a dream I would want. So,
sounds cool. Kind of haunted a little bit.
Yeah.
Like a haunted castle with like.
I'm picturing it at night for some reason.
Oh wow, nighttime dream with some
the Scottish moors.
with
hills,
those things. Do they hold those
castles.
wood things with the
Yeah.
fire? Yeah.
And I'm picturing you guys. I don't know why I'm picturing this. You guys have like maybe some coffee. You guys are holding some or tea. And
They don't
something.
drink tea. They drink beer in Scotland. Come on
They
now.
drink scotch. All right, you guys have a glass of scotch and you're going for a stroll amongst the castles. I like it.
Yeah. Old time scenery. Cows walking around. It'd be good.
Well, I hope you both have those dreams tonight, and I hope I have my dream tonight.
Fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed.
Yes.
And so before we wrap up, I want you to talk a little bit about your book that you wrote and sort of where people can find it, but also what's maybe different about this book than maybe some other books that they've heard, and what they could maybe get from it, and also maybe who would be most suitable for that book.
Okay, so my book is called Love You Like the Sky, Surviving the Suicide of a Beloved. And it's written for any survivor of a suicide. So if you've had a boyfriend or a husband or a wife or a girlfriend who has died from suicide and you're sort of just completely distraught and don't know how to get through, it's a really dark experience. This book is basically meant to be as a companion, as well as offering practical guidance and tools and ways to help you work through the different stages of the book. So I lay out 3 different stages that I went through, which were despair, shifting, and then beauty. And the book is pretty personal. It's really raw. I wrote my former boyfriend emails after he died. And so this is a compilation of those emails. It's sort of going through the story of what happened and my grief process. And then I know how I was getting myself through it. And then I have sections where I'm writing more as a psychologist and the older sort of narrator. Who can offer the reader tools. But since the book has come out, people who have experienced all kinds of loss have shared with me that it's really helped them. So it's not really just for anybody surviving suicide. It could be, it could be for a child that died or a parent that died or any kind of grief, or even people who are, especially millennials, who are struggling with their own depression or suicidality. Because I talk up a lot about that in the book, how I was suicidal and how I got through it. So yeah, and it can be found on Amazon, or any other online booksellers or my website, but mostly people buy it through Amazon.
Perfect. And that title is, again?
Love You Like the Sky, Surviving the Suicide of a Beloved.
Perfect.
Why the Loving You Like the Sky? What is that?
Love You Like the Sky?
Yeah.
So I just absolutely adored his blue eyes. Like, he had the most beautiful, huge blue eyes. And whenever I'd look at his eyes and like we were outside, like the sky and his eyes sort of blended. And it's just, for me, a poetic way of referencing him and, the haunting of, something I think pretty mystical and ineffable about like the sky. It's like somewhere you can never get to, and it's like you think it's right in front of you and then you can't touch it. So it sort of was a metaphor for my feelings towards him and how it felt to be longing for him somewhere that I didn't know where he was in death, and couldn't ever feel like I was ever going to reach him.
Wow, a lot of thought went into that. I like that. No, it's really nice. And was his eyes blue?
It's super blue, yeah. He had like sky blue eyes, yeah.
Well, it could have been like a dark, really dark brown. And it's
What kind of sky is brown?
Well, if you go out at night and you're looking up, as in my dream, you look up, it's just the sky's black. Okay, it's blue, Sean. We got it.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for taking the time out to do this, and thank you for taking the time to talk about some topics that aren't always easy, but you showed a lot of courage, and you did it.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed the laughter and the comments, and learning a lot about your story and your journey and things I wouldn't have thought about. And even how you process your dreams was, for me, some good takeaways as I move forward. in this life too. So, thank you again for coming on. Appreciate it, and glad we were able to connect. And please let us know if you do get any more dreams of him moving forward.
Okay, guys, I'll keep you posted. And thanks again.
Absolutely. And you can check out our book on Amazon again, so check that out. So you please check out our platform at griefdreams.ca for more information on the topic. We added a donation button, and there are perks to those who donate. If you have Facebook, you can join the Grief Dreams group. You can share your dreams or hear more dreams of others. Very supportive group, so definitely check it out. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Grief Dreams. And check out our other podcast. Yes, we have another one, and it is...
Say what?
It's called Grief Cafe, and it is a place that we talk about generally we talk about grief, topics that pop up throughout in the world, in the news, and like, for instance, like, the Amazon fires that happened, or mass shootings, mass killings. And it's me, it's Joshua, and it's our good friend Darwin Dave. So check that out. We have a website, griefcafe.com, and an email address, griefcafepodcast@gmail.com. So as always, we like to end our podcast with love and gratitude from us to you.
I have questions. I have introduced myself. You have introduced yourself. This is a very good conversation.